Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pro Wrestling Mecca of the World here in Cleveland, Ohio. I am your dangerously, dashingly, strikingly handsome, ever so amazing host, Nick. And with me, as always, is nobody, because this is PWP TV. You can follow the show on Twitter at ProWPodcast. Once again, at ProWPodcast. The Gmail is ProWrestlingPod@gmail.com. Once again, ProWrestlingPod@gmail.com. Podcast to Matt that I wasn't going to screw it up, and I almost did. I came this close, but I didn't. So that is that. How's everyone doing today? Everyone good? I know I am. Today we are going to be talking about a really odd time in wrestling history. This incident. And as many of you guys know, the story, I'm going to relay the story, if you will. And essentially, we had a house show at Madison Square Garden, no less, which I think kind of gets overlooked at the fact of what happened for the curtain call. But the thing is, WWE in 1996, they didn't have a lot of money. So for them to go to Madison Square Garden and draw the way they did was really saying something about how confident they were in their performers at that time. And I don't know, I always just thought that was always overlooked by the story itself. Not saying that the story doesn't deserve any kind of notoriety. It does, but it's always just interesting because whenever you talk about the current call, no one really understands that part of it. But anyway, so the year is 1996. We have the Click are all wrestling a tag match, right? You have Shawn and Diesel taking on Razor Ramon and Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Or no, I'm sorry. It was I believe it was Razor versus Diesel, I believe. It was their last match for the company. That was their last contractually obligated match. And the interesting thing was that they were leaving for WCW. Scott and Kevin both were ready just to leave. They had already committed to WCW. It was their last night. Everyone knew that they were going to WCW. They did the favors going out, so to speak. So they were on their way out. Triple H was scheduled to win the King of the Ring in 1996. Now this was a couple weeks before King of the Ring, and Shawn Michaels was the champion at the time. Well, as the saying goes in professional wrestling, you never break kayfabe. Don't expose the business, as they call it. Essentially, if two guys hate each other, for anyone who doesn't know what kayfabe is, if you don't like each other in the ring, you should be portraying that outside of the ring. Anytime you see each other in public, always act like you don't like that person. Like that person's a jerk. They're this, they're that. And the strange thing, not really strange, but just interesting, is back in the day for kayfabe, if two guys hated each other in terms of their in-ring personalities outside the ring, there was always that unspoken rule of you're traveling in one way, I'm traveling the other. We're not to be seen together. We're not to be heard together. Nothing. But now in 2018, kayfabe's a lot different. The saying is kayfabe is dead, and I do believe that to an extent. But anyway, not to cut a promo on kayfabe or anything, but so the story goes, Razor and Diesel were on their way to WCW. Razor wanted more money. He straight up told Vince, look, I've been doing my Razor thing. I am Intercontinental Champion. I'm doing well for myself, but I want to do better. What can I do to do better? And Vince said, nothing. You're good. And Scott kind of knew then because he said, well, if I'm doing this and it's taking me here, but I want to be here, I want to be making Kev money, as he calls it. Well, then I've plateaued. I've reached the ceiling, and that's where WWE views me at. So that was his main reason to go. And Kev's it was guaranteed money, obviously. As a lot of people back then, they wanted their guaranteed money, and I don't blame them one bit. So they were gone. And as the incident goes, match is over, and keep in mind you have this core two good guys and two bad guys chemistry, kayfabe. Match is over. Shawn and Triple H, before they go out to the curtain, they asked Vince, hey, can we go out there and celebrate with them? It said last night there are boys, blah, blah, blah. Vince says, yeah, sure, why not? But as a lot of people will say, there wasn't really a spoken rule in terms of how much they were going to expose the business And that's always the big question mark when people talk about the curtain call incident is smuggled in a camera, which to me is something else that it blows my mind because these weren't like, were huge. It wasn't anything small. So for him to somehow get that past security, that's a different story. But they all come out, they're all cheering, they're clapping, hugging, celebrating, rejoicing. The fans are confused because, again, this was a time where kayfabe was to be believed. And you hear just the groaning from the fans, like, what's going on? Why is Razor, this bad guy, why is he hugging Shawn Michaels? They're like, oh, well, it's not like you're going to punish us. Shawn was the champion. Vince isn't going to touch you if you're the champion. Unless you get arrested, you get a lot more leeway when you're the champion. So really, all of that boiled down to Triple H. Triple H essentially got the brunt of it. He lost his spot at King of the Ring 96, which obviously was okay considering that was the birth of Stone Cold Steve Austin. So another thing that was whatever. And that was pretty much it. You had a guy in Shawn Michaels who was the champion. He never got touched. His momentum kept going. Razor and Diesel went to WCW as the outsiders who would find success in the NWO, and the rest is history. Triple H, on the other hand, he still did pretty good for himself. He went on to become multi-time champion and tag team champion and this and that. So Triple H did just fine for himself. Really, in hindsight, all four guys did well for themselves. And looking back, I don't think that this is really an incident that should have even have been an incident because, yeah, kayfabe was exposed that night, but I think a lot of people say that this was the night that kayfabe officially died because of how successful all four of them went on their own. And they also say this is the night kayfabe died because ever since then, kayfabe's kind of been looked at a little bit lighter. And I completely agree with that. I think this was the night kayfabe died. I don't think anyone really expected it to happen that way. It just did. And with that being said, looking back on it, I don't really think that there's much of a controversy. And what's funny is that if you go back and you rewatch Scott Hall's DVD that they put out, if you watch Shawn Michaels' DVD that they put out, and Triple H's DVD that they put out, they always talk about the curtain call. And it always amazed me because it shouldn't even be a controversy. It was just really four guys, just celebrate and be like, man, we're going to miss you, blah, blah, blah. Again, and I know it's a different time period, so maybe that's why I don't really feel like it's that big of a deal. But I mean, looking at wrestling ever since then, it didn't hurt the business. I mean, it didn't do it favors, at least at the time. But I think in hindsight, it did a lot of favors. Because of this, we had NWO and DX rivaling each other all through the 90s. And there's nothing wrong with competition. Vince will tell you that. Triple H will tell you that. Shawn will tell you that. Diesel will tell you that. Scott Hall will tell you that. Everyone will say that. And competition is good. And I don't find anything wrong with what they did that night. And maybe I'm one of the few. I don't know. So for me personally, the curtain call wasn't even really a controversy. It was just a really odd point in wrestling history that I think shouldn't go unnoticed. So, that's just my take on it. Well, that'll wrap it up for this edition of PWP TV. You want to follow the show on Twitter. The Twitter page is at ProW Podcast. Once again, at ProW Podcast. The Gmail is prowrestlingpod@gmail.com. Leave a link to all that in the stuff below. My name is Nick, and I'll see you guys next time.